I'd like to welcome you tonight to our first of 3 parent meetings. Tonight's goal is to provide an overview of the reopening plan and possibly answer some questions at the end of the meeting. And on Thursday, August 13th at 6 p.m., we'll have a question and answer session for our parents. And next week, on Wednesday, August 19th, 2020 at 7 a.m., we'll have an additional time for our parents to answer questions. I'd like to start this evening with a team of dedicated administrators that are here tonight with me to go over the plan and interject important information about the plan. Randolph Sapp, he's the business official and board-approved COVID resource officer for our district. Dan Rabideau, she's a director of student services and board-approved deputy COVID resource officer. Ms. Amy Campbell, she's director of curriculum instruction and presently the intermediate principal serving grades 3 through 5. Ms. Carol Rawson, primary principal serving grades pre-K through 2. Scott Storms, our middle school principal serving grades 6 through 8. Mr. Matt Berry, high school principal serving grades 9 through 12. And Ms. Mary Sexton, our middle school associate principal and athletic director. Tonight, I'd like you to provide with an overview of the plan and how do we come up with this plan to move forward and what does it look like in the future at Peru. We began this process in late April and discussed different plans based on the information we knew at that time. The district came up with 5 plans that potentially work for our district. But moving forward, the plans changed because of the information we were learning, requirements and guidance documents that were shared through the New York State Education Department, the New York State Department of Health, and the governor's office as new information was being shared concerning the coronavirus. Well, it looks and sounds good on paper for other districts in the North Country, doesn't align with the size of Peru. We are approximately 2,000 students, one of the 2 largest districts in Clinton County. We sometimes have to do things differently to balance the needs of our students and staff and safety. Our plan requirements that you see now came from 2 sources. The interim guidance of in-person instruction at pre-K through grade 12 during the coronavirus public health emergency that was by the Department of Health on July 13, 2020. And recovering, rebuilding, and renewing the spirit of New York schools reopening guidance from the New York State Education Department, also on July 13, 2020. The guidance that we struggled the most was the 6-foot social distancing and wearing a face mask. The 6-foot social distance decreased our ability to have full classrooms of students to classrooms of 10 to 12 students based on that guidance. Completely changed the game as we made adjustments to meet it, but the process we lost in that capacity was to bring our entire elementary school. We understand the struggle and frustration is placed on our Peru families, and we empathize with you. Tonight, we're going to go through the plan and post it on our website for you to peruse. We've also posted our plans that the governor has mandated on our website outlining a remote plan for instruction, testing, and contact tracing. We'll talk more about these later in the presentation.
Okay, so first we're going to talk about what model we are using for opening Peru School and why we're using that model. Dr. Palmer?
The model that the district has chosen is hybrid model 2. It's pre-K through 12th grade. The kids will be put in the cohorts, cohort AA and the cohort BB. Students will come to school 2 days per week, predetermined, and then have 3 days of remote instruction. The reason the district chose that model, as I shared earlier, was our original intentions was to have our entire elementary kids back on campus. We could not do that with the social distancing component. Our rooms are not large enough to have kids more than 10 to 12 in a room based on the square footage that we were required to follow. The other part of the plan is on Wednesdays is a remote instruction day for the entire district, all children. And during that time will be a deep cleaning of the district, both buildings as well as normal cleanings Monday through Friday. But Wednesday is a deep disinfectant day also.
And Mr. Sapp, how will daily health screening process checks be performed for both teachers and students?
Daily health screening is an essential component of our risk reduction strategies. It involves students employees, visitors, guests, and contractors. All employees must complete a health screening survey prior to entering the building each day. The survey may take place online or via a paper questionnaire. All employees will take their temperatures at their school entrance prior to beginning their workday. A COVID health station is set up at each office to support the screening. Employees will not report to work if their temperature is above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. All students will have their temperatures verified by their parent or guardian in their home. If the student's temperature is below 100 degrees and they do not show signs of COVID-19, they will be permitted to board the bus or enter the building. If their temperature is above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the parent or guardian should keep them from home. It is essential to the well-being of the community that students who are sick remain at home. All visitors, guests, and contractors will be required to complete a temperature check and health screening questionnaire similar to the one completed by employees of Peru Central School District. They will only be permitted to enter a building if their temperature is below 100 degrees Fahrenheit and they successfully complete the COVID-19 questionnaire. Regarding health hygiene practices, the district has established clear protocols and appropriate signage to instruct staff and students in correct hand and respiratory hygiene. Hand washing signage has been installed above each sink within the district. These signs provide hand washing steps in accordance with CDC guidelines. Respiratory hygiene posters are also displayed throughout each building within the district. Throughout the course of the school day, students and staff will practice good hand hygiene practices. The district will provide time for students to perform the traditional hand washing with soap and water, lathering a minimum of 20 seconds. This is the most preferred method. However, if this is not feasible, the district will provide hand wash sanitization throughout the common areas to include classrooms, entrances, and offices, and other spaces when available. Some students or staff may be unable to use alcohol-based hand sanitizer for health reasons. Therefore, they must be permitted to wash their hands with soap and water, and the district will make the appropriate accommodations. Thank you.
And how are we going to meet the requirements for social distancing? So just like when you go to the grocery store, 6-foot social distancing protocols have been set up at Peru. Signs will be posted throughout buildings in hallways, bathrooms, classrooms, entrances, offices, break rooms, etc., reinforcing the importance of social distancing. Classrooms and offices will be cleared of unnecessary excessive furniture to allow for 6-foot social distancing of students and desks. There will also be models with tape on the floors and walls, identifying 6 foot of spacing in the given area. Students will also be reminded at arrival and dismissal to maintain social distancing protocols to the best of their ability. I'm sure their teachers will also remind them throughout the day. The district will require all employees, necessary visitors, and students to wear cloth face coverings whenever social distancing cannot be maintained. And next, Mr. Storms will talk about the protocols for mask wearing.
Hello. All students and staff at Peru Central School will be required to wear a mask. The district will provide masks to individuals that do not have a mask. And the district will provide mask breaks in every classroom throughout the day for the students. Students who have medical reasons for not wearing a mask will need to provide documentation from healthcare providers that will make appropriate accommodations for those students on a case-by-case basis.
people can't join because the 100 limit is exceeded. Is there any way to fix that? No, okay. So we've maxed out.
We maxed out what?
Right now.
There's 100 people on the Zoom meeting, and I was texted to see if we could add more, but it's not possible at this time.
Zoom can't add more than that?
At the moment, we can do it for later on.
Okay, so we'll continue with where we're at. Sorry for the interruption. What will happen if a student or staff member becomes ill during the day? So faculty and staff will be trained on symptoms to watch for that would warrant a referral to the school nurse. Once referred to the school nurse, COVID sick rooms have been designated in buildings to safely isolate symptomatic individuals. The symptomatic person will then be assessed by the school nurse. The school nurses are all professional registered nurses. Using the COVID screening tool, the school nurse will assess each individual. If the person is determined to be symptomatic, he or she will remain safely isolated until they can be picked up and leave campus. From there, safety protocols, tracing procedures, and notification will occur in conjunction with the health department. And next, Dr. Palmer would talk about safety drills.
Even through the coronavirus time that we know, we still have the responsibility to conduct safety drills every year. Ed Law 807 requires a school to have 8 fire drills and 4 lockdown drills each year. The district is going to continue in that process, but at a different, it's going to look different. We're going to maintain our social distancing, and we'll probably be splitting classes in half when they're doing a lockdown drill. So kids will model it for one half of the class, and then vice versa when the other half has the opportunity. When we go outside for evacuation drills, we will maintain 6-foot social distancing. I just want to bring to everyone's attention now, if there was an actual emergency that required an evacuation or a lockdown, social distancing may not be possible, should not be the first priority of the situation. Student and staff safety is the first priority.
And Mr. Sapp, what is Peru doing about air circulation in the buildings?
Another critical COVID-19 risk reduction strategy is to improve air quality within classrooms. The district schools are committed to increasing fresh air ventilation rate to the extent possible to aid in maintaining a healthy indoor air quality. To accomplish this, the district has purchased filters with a considerably higher minimum efficiency reporting value rating than was previously used. The filters are scheduled to be installed prior to the beginning of school. In addition, the district has also purchased air purifier units for every classroom. The air purifiers come with a high efficiency particulate air filter and are designed to clean the air in the rooms up to 2 times per hour and will effectively remove 99.9% of airborne particles.
And Dr. Palmer, what facilities are available for hand washing and getting drinks of water in the day?
Guidance also for that is that water fountains will be shut off in the district, but our bottle stations where kids have the ability to bring water bottles to school will be available, as well as cups at each of those stations, so that kids have an opportunity to have water throughout the course of the school day. The other question?
Hand washing facility.
Hand washing facilities. The same protocol as Mr. Sapp discussed earlier, the multiple times of washing their hands throughout the course of the school day. We know that's not always possible with sinks throughout the district. In a primary school, we know we have sinks in each room, but the district has already purchased 1,000 gallons of hand sanitizer to also distribute throughout all the classrooms, so that that process will also be done periodically throughout the course of the school day.
And how are breakfast and lunch going to work in each building?
So breakfast and lunches will be served in each of the classrooms where students will sit at socially distanced seats that are 6 feet apart. Students who have allergies will be addressed on an individual basis to ensure that their needs are met.
And will meals be available to students who are fully remote, Ms. Campbell?
Yes, students that are fully remote, we are still working out the details of how those meals are going to be distributed, but it does seem that we'll have them one day a week, most likely on Wednesdays. There will be a plan to get those meals to those students.
Mr. Sapp, what are the district protocols for transporting students?
School buses will be considerably different in regards to their carrying capability. In addition, students who are able to will be required to wear masks and socially distance on the buses. Only one student will be permitted on each seat, and they will be required to sit near the window. If a student does not have a mask, a disposable mask will be provided before they are permitted to enter the bus. Students with a disability, which would prevent them from wearing a mask, will not be forced to do so or denied transportation. However, an accommodation must be cleared through the building principal's office prior to riding the bus. Buses will be deep cleaned and disinfected at least daily. High contact spots and areas will be wiped down after each run. All buses will be equipped with disposable masks and gloves. Drivers, monitors, and attendants who must have direct physical contact with students must wear gloves. School bus drivers, monitors, and attendants will wear a face covering along with an optional face shield. Transportation staff will be trained and provided periodic refreshers on the proper use of personal protective equipment and the signs and symptoms of COVID-19.
Ms. Campbell, many parents want to drop off and pick up their students, their children. Is that going to be possible this year?
Yes, it will look very different than it has in past years. And each building will be sharing their protocols for drop off and pickup with parents prior to the first day of school. But it absolutely is an option.
All right, Ms. Sexton. So the students have been out of school for a while, and what protocols are in place to help students with their social emotional well-being as they transition back?
Identifying and addressing the social and emotional needs of students is a collaborative effort between students, families, and school faculty and staff. The comprehensive school counseling plan will continue to be updated and informed from input from stakeholders. School counselors and school psychologists will provide individual and group counseling sessions based on the presenting needs of students. Students' needs will be identified through parent or faculty observation, student self-report, current research, and standardized rating scales when applicable. In addition to individual and group counseling, students will receive classroom counseling lessons to address universal needs of students. Topics could include, but are not limited to, goal setting, decision-making, self-regulation, identifying bullying and harassment, relationship building, and conflict resolution. In addition to our counseling and psychology teams, our district hosts on-site mental health counseling through BHSN and Champlain Valley Family Center with both in-person and remote capability. These agencies provide our students and families access to licensed mental health counselors and licensed social workers who provide students with clinical, therapeutic intervention and support. These services include availability for imminent risk assessment and crisis intervention. Lastly, our district utilizes Social Sentinel as an online program that provides our students with the ability to report concerns or needs 24/7, and these tips are reviewed and responded to by district leadership on a regular basis, and those tips can be submitted on the district website.
And Dr. Palmer, scheduling is going to be very different this year. What is it going to look like?
Scheduling in the In remote plan 2, as we talked about, students that are in school or in that A group or B group, depending upon the splitting of the sections, and we made every effort to make sure that families are still together. That's been very clear by our community. Scheduling is still going to follow the suit that it has in the past. The high school is still running on a 9-period school day, as well as the middle school. The expectations are still the same as far as absenteeism and making sure the students are here and accountable. In the elementary school, as far as scheduling, design plan is a little bit different, where kids will spend a lot more time in their classrooms with cohort tracing.
And with kids being in person, remote, and back and forth, Mr. Berry, how will attendance be tracked this year? What will the district do about students who are chronically absent from classes?
The district is responsible for developing a mechanism to collect and report teachers' daily attendance or attendance regardless of the instructional setting. The district has created the following protocols for attendance. When students are in person, AA or BB, attendance will be collected using the traditional format. When students are receiving remote learning, attendance will be collected using a Google form in their Seesaw or Google Classroom platform. Student and staff attendance will be collected using School Tool or student management system. Flexibility should be considered when monitoring attendance at a remote model. Parent schedules, availability of technology, or other barriers may preclude students from connecting with teachers at a certain time. However, collecting data such as assignments or check-ins online are other possible options. Chronic absenteeism. In working, the district's goal is to establish clear guidelines of student attendance. We understand chronic absence includes all absences from instruction, both excused and unexcused. It's essential for school attendance policies to focus on the academic consequences of lost instructional time, and for the school procedures to address absences before students fall behind in school. The development of positive relationships may be a lifeline for students who are disconnected from school. There have been procedures put in place to develop relationships with all of our students and will continue through the 2020-2021 school year. The district will continue to make phone calls to families. Personal direct contacts are often the simplest solution to provide immediate opportunity to offer resource and assess family needs. On top of this, partnering with local social service entities will also be a priority of the district to be sure that students with chronic absenteeism are in attendance at school.
Thank you. Dr. Palmer, so many families and teachers depended on technology last spring to get their education. What's the district's plan for technology this year?
Well, you always learn by mistakes, and you learn by as we were thrusted into this last year, the district has made efforts. We want to thank Beekmantown for their efforts allowing us to borrow their buses that had a Kajits on them. We've now purchased 3 Kajits systems for our own buses, so we'll have hotspots as we did last year. We're also in agreement of buying an additional 100 Kajits for individual use, so that the families that are struggling with internet connectivity will have the availability to sign those out and be able to use them. We will still be offering our parking lots for family usage if that's something they choose to use. And I understand one of the biggest thing with some of our families, and they've reached out to me, as far as their areas does not allow them to have connectivity for the internet. I have reached out to Spectrum. I've talked to Assemblyman Mr. Billy Jones. People are out there looking. The system's not perfect, but we're making great strides in trying to move forward in that direction.
Okay, our next question was about connectivity issues. I think you sort of just answered that. Did you have anything further on it, or you want me to go ahead?
Just that the district understands, and we are working to the best of our ability to try to assist our families. But at this time, it's an issue with the private sector, and we're trying to work through that process with those companies.
Ms. Campbell, communication is a huge issue with families with multiple students in different buildings, especially when some kids are here on campus and some kids are at home. How are we communicating with families?
So when we're sharing information with families, we obviously will continue to use our traditional methods, picking up the telephone and calling families when we need to make contact. website posts, social media. We have a dedicated page on the website for all things connected to reopening. But additionally, and probably most importantly, we have invested in a platform called Parent Square. And it's got parent in the name because the purpose for it is for schools to talk and communicate directly with families, and it's user-friendly for families. I would encourage anyone who has not had an opportunity to set up their Parent Square account to reach out to their building principal if they need more information because they're not receiving Parent Square. But that tool will allow us to send messages district-wide in each building, and teachers will be able to communicate directly with parents via text messaging and posting so that they can keep in contact through, it's confidential, and they can continue to share information, and parents who want information directly from a teacher will be able to use that platform.
All right, and Ms. Campbell, you're still on the hot seat. So last spring, emergency remote learning was a huge learning curve for families and teachers and students. How is this remote learning in the fall going to be different from the emergency remote learning last spring?
Yes, I think as Dr. Palmer said, we learned from the things we've done in the past and we want to improve them. We spent a great deal of time this summer working with a select group of teachers to try to design a remote plan that will work better than what we were doing in the spring. We understand that we need to focus on building relationships with students. We need to focus on making sure we have consistent tools that we are using throughout the district so that the students and their parents can have easy access to information about assignments. We've also changed the things that we expect to be done in a remote plan. So we're incorporating more live instruction time. We're streamlining the tools that we're using, making sure that the students are familiar with them. And we're also having teachers dedicate office hours. Additionally, all students 3 through 12 will have access to devices this year. And then we have a plan for primary families in the pre-K2 that need access that we'll be sharing more of later. And then the other thing that we are going to make sure that we stress to our students is how to use their technology to learn. And so we have that incorporated as well into the first couple of weeks of school to really make sure that they're comfortable using that technology as a learning tool.
And Mr. Berry, many of our students in the high school attend CB Tech as part of their program. What's that going to look like this year?
Yeah, so there's a few questions in the chat too on CD Tech, and so hopefully those people who are on can hear me clearly, and we are ready to roll in that direction. So the CB Tech schedule will be also an AABB schedule. However, the AA days for CB Tech students will be first year CB Tech students and New Visions Engineering and New Visions Health. So those are the students on the AA days from 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on Mondays and Tuesdays. On Thursdays and Fridays are the BB schedule students who are going to be the second year CB Tech students. Those students will, again, go attend at CB Tech from 9 to 2:30. And there's also going to be some outside parameters set by CB Tech for 1.5 hours of remote. If a student is attending CB Tech at Peru, they will be in remote at Peru for their off days, meaning if they attended CB Tech on a BB schedule, their program ran on that, they're a second year CB Tech student, they would remotely attend those scheduled classes on the AA days to receive that education and the remote learning piece on the day off.
All right, and so a really big hot topic we all want to know about athletics and extracurriculars. We know how important they are to motivate our students to learn and be here at school. So Ms. Sexton, can you speak to us about what's happening with athletics?
Absolutely. So beginning back in June, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association formed a task force that has been charged with examining basically how can we approach interscholastic athletics in this pandemic. They issued a series of surveys to stakeholders within athletics, and through that input, developed a plan going ahead into this year. At this time, we are currently paused through September 21st. The hope is that we would be able to move into a traditional fall season at that time. But in the event that the pause is extended beyond September 21st, we would be moving to 3 consecutive 10-week seasons that begin in January. Any updates or press releases from the New York State Public High School Athletic Association will be shared through Parent Square. And one question that has come up a couple of times is what students will be eligible for athletics? And I just wanted to clarify that whether a student is attending in person or is receiving 100% remote instruction through the school district, both of those athletes would be eligible for athletics.
And how about extracurricular activities, Mr. Storms?
Well, the district knows how important extracurricular activities are to the exploration and development of our students. At this point, the district is developing plans to ensure that any extracurricular activity can function in both in-person or remote environments. So more information will be shared as plans are developed with our staff running the various extracurricular activities.
And now a topic that I hold near and dear to my heart, special education services. We do have special education plans that address in-person, remote, and hybrid instruction. Roles and responsibilities of administrators, teachers, service providers, parents, and students are more well defined to ensure that every child has the opportunity to receive their education in accordance with their IEP and in keeping with the health and safety of students. We are offering the full continuum of programs and services at all levels. The resource room, integrated co-teaching, special classes, related services, and consultant teacher services as well. And back to Dr. Palmer. Are there any updates that you wanted to share with the district at this time?
This is a constantly evolving process. The 2 words that we've used this spring and going into the fall is a time of uncertainty and an ebb and flow of fluidity, because we could change on a dime, given more information, that whether we can come back 100% or we'd have to go out 100% remote. We have to have the flexibility and transparency with our families to understand that piece. We don't control that. That comes from the governor's office, the Department of Health, or SED may make the decision that we would change direction on what the district's presently doing. But we're committed to our families to make sure that we can provide the best education that we can.
And Ms. Rawson, it's so important to know who my child's teacher is going to be and what group they're going to be assigned to, the A's or the B's. How are we going to find that out, and when are we going to find that out?
So teams have been working very diligently in each of the buildings, and we're working to ensure or to try and line up households on the same AA day or BB day. And so that takes a lot of careful consideration in ensuring those things. And so we're hoping to get a list of your child's teacher and the cohort group that you belong to during this hybrid 2 model by the end of next week.
So, Mr. Berry, school hours, what do they look like in the fall? Are they going to be the same as normal?
Yes, in-person days, AA and BB will be as they are from 7:28 to 2:08 in the high school, and roughly 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the elementary schools. The times are not changing. However, there are some changes. If you're a remote plan, there might be a little bit of difference in the elementary world compared to the secondary world. The secondary world, you will be, that schedule for a remote learner will mirror the daily schedule for a student who is fully remote. For example, if their ELA class starts at 7:28, so does the remote ELA class. start at 7:28. There may be some differences in the elementary, but those typical school hours will not change.
And Ms. Rawson, now that I know that my young child is going to be home for some days, do you have any resources or suggestions about childcare?
Yeah, we know it's a difficult time for families and having to find childcare, so we do have a couple of resources that we did share to our Facebook page. It's from the Child Care Council of Northern New York and the Office of Children and Family Services. These are resources that are available to help families in their search for childcare. And we do have them posted on our Facebook page.
Mr. Storms, this has been a really tough decision for some families. So maybe we want to go in person or maybe we want to go remote. If I start one way, can I change to the other model, or how is the district going to handle that?
So it's definitely a difficult decision, I'm sure, for most families at this point. This is a parent's choice. As we know, parents know their children the best, and families have their options they have to work through. And the decision on in-person instruction or hybrid remote instruction can be difficult. However, it's important that families take into account the importance of the continuity of instruction. So we'll be encouraging families not to continually switch back and forth, but to pick a particular model and stick to it for a period of time.
So those questions really reviewed the plan that we were required to write and submit. And I think that ends this portion. So Dr. Palmer, I don't know if we have some crowd questions we want to proceed with or how you'd like to go ahead.
Well, we definitely have time, so if there's questions that the community would like to ask, and also just to share with you, I have to apologize that we were only limited to 100 tonight, but we are going to put this also on YouTube after the meeting so people can hear this, and we will make sure it's open to more people for tomorrow night. So I do want to apologize for that. The one last piece just to share with the school community, the second component of the reopening plan that you may see on our website tonight is called the addendum, which is the remote learning plan, the testing of students and staff, and contact tracing. The governor has also required us to elaborate more on those three components of our plan. So we took the remote learning plan out of our regular plan, so it's replicated there. We've added additional information on the testing of students and staff and the contact tracing component. One thing I want to be clear with our school community is when we use the word testing, it's a very loose word. The governor he elected to use that word for testing, but what the school districts do and are responsible for is actually screening. We screen students but do not test. Tests would come from the health department or from the hospital. We have additional information in this plan for families if they're looking for that. If a child comes down, and it's been talked earlier tonight, with COVID symptoms, they would be encouraged by our nurses to seek that out, but that is something still that would go through the families themselves and their physicians. We are open for questions if that's.
Dr. Palmer, I've been monitoring questions, kind of keeping track of some if you want me to fire them out.
Yes, please do so.
Okay, so one of the questions, the earliest one, try to go in the best chronological order as possible. If a student has a temperature in the morning, will they have to be tested to come back to school? What's the protocol if a student has a temperature?
It's traditionally, once a child has a temperature, they must be 24 hours free of temperature without medication. So it's medication free and 24 hours.
Okay. For students who are on 100% remote learning, will counselors be made available and how will that look? From the secondary end, I can speak to that yes, they absolutely will be made available. And it can look like a Google Meet, it can look like a phone call. It can look like pretty much anything that's going to meet the needs of the student's safety and health and emotional well-being, even a visit from the secondary end.
And at the primary level, counselors often, what happened in our emergency remote learning that worked out and will continue is that they will reach out and not connect only with the student, but with the families as well.
And,
Oh, I was just gonna add about IEP students. If there's a student that has a disability and they have an IEP and counseling is on their IEP, that's a required service and we will continue to offer that.
and I would just add that the agencies that we collaborate with also have the capability for phone calls or virtual counseling sessions.
A follow-up question to the temperature, not to go out of turn, but it came up as we're talking about it. If a student has a temperature, do siblings have to stay home? Student has a temperature, do siblings have to stay home?
I think that'd be a case-by-case scenario. But traditionally, if it's just a temperature, I think that would be more, of course, Ms. Rabideau and the nurses as far as that piece. If it's just a single isolated situation.
Right, and I think I'd like to also consult with our medical services provider, Lori Emer, and see what she has to say in regards to that. And it would also depend on if they are exhibiting COVID symptoms in the regular COVID screening. So that's something that we can certainly look into. I'll make note.
Chronologically, and also coming up later, is a question of backpacks. Since we're not losing, we are losing access to our lockers, at least on the onset of school. Will students have to carry backpacks at the secondary level? Yeah, that's yes. To be clear, that's how they are going to have to get their possessions to and from. And then the follow-up question, and I can't speak to, I'll let the elementary level speak to the backpacks at the elementary level and student travel, and then we'll go into the safety piece of it.
So backpacks will be used back and forth, but they cannot stay at the building. I mean, little kids will have some things that they'll need to bring, and it helps them to keep things from flying everywhere. So, but they will be, have to go back and forth every day and not be kept at school.
And then for safety, the question aligned with backpacks, or what are we doing for safety? And I would say that one would be something that would be very consistent as what we would do for safety during a traditional bricks and mortar situation. Yes, there'll be more of them, but it's something that we monitor and we keep in mind while respecting due process of the student and their own rights and trust of their responsibility in our school building. Safety is our number one concern. And we take it very seriously. Can a student use their home computer rather than a Chromebook? All students in grades 3 through 12 will be issued Chromebooks. The question being, however, and that takes care of some other questions that were in there. The issue being, can they use their own personal computer versus the school issued computer?
The students, if they've got their own home device and are able to get onto Google and able to get into Google Classroom, knowing that they actually have the access to their password and able to get on, then they would be able to use it. During emergency remote learning, we did have many students who did use their personal devices at home. But the important thing to remember is students in grades 3 through 12 will have their own student or school issued Chromebook, so that will definitely help in this process.
I don't think though that home devices could be brought into school and put on our network.
Correct.
So
So if it was at home,
if they're at home, they can use their own device, but it's not like we could have a different device brought to school. At school, they will be using their school issued Chromebook.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, there were a few staff questions as to what the Wednesday schedule looks like for staff, and there was also a question about lunch monitors and staff. That meeting I believe
Staff
is
will
for
be
next week.
Wednesday night.
Okay, so just to clarify the staff questions, Wednesday
Wednesday night at 6 p.m.
Wednesday at 6 p.m. staff questions. Again, Wednesday at 6 p.m. There was a question about students wearing masks, and if there is a refusal, will there be disciplinary action that takes place? How is that going to be enforced? I can take that from the secondary angle, and Mr. Storms can follow up, but we're going to do everything that we can possible to educate students on the importance of wearing masks and the science-based research out there about why we wear masks, and also adhere to social distance guidelines. At the secondary level, it will become a conversation if a student continues to refuse to take off their mask, just as they might refuse to, I don't know, to be an extreme example for this particular conversation, if they refuse to put down a baseball bat. Insubordination escalates because they are taking health of other people and the safety of other people. We have to take that into consideration and balance the two. However, no shaming involved, but definitely educational piece will be in place before those disciplinary avenues are traveled.
So it's really important that we recognize that as a district, we are requiring everyone to wear a mask. So we are going to do everything. We had a long conversation about it today and throughout the summer about how important it is as administrators that we have opportunities to talk to students and to really be able to teach them why it's important to wear masks. So we're going to need, we realize it's difficult. We don't enjoy wearing them. We realize that sometimes kids may not be wearing them always when they're not in school. But what's going to be really important is that we're in collaboration with families and working together to support the need to wear masks. So as administrators, that will be something we'll be working on.
And I'd like to chime in and just state that we're going to use it as a teaching, a reteaching, a constant teaching and reteaching, and provide students with those mask breaks, developmentally appropriate age groups. You know, the younger the child, they might require more of a mask break, and so teachers have a discretion to do that. I know that in the primary, minimally, we'll do it every 45 minutes, but a teacher may see a student or groups of students within their classroom that need it earlier than that. And that is completely fine to do. And they've been, and that will be part of our protocols.
Question that came up, so we have what if a child's asthmatic or something like that? I think, again, we do have to weigh in case by case basis, but I'll allow Ms. Rabideau to.
Sure, and there are a number of students here at Peru that have some type of breathing issue or concern and have seen their doctors, and their doctors have determined that medically they cannot wear a mask. And so we are looking at plans as to how to keep them safe and how to keep the people around them safe. Some of them may benefit from using a shield, and as well, people around them wearing, you know, the shield and the mask. What we're going to do is have to have families in those situations contact their building principal or myself, and we'll talk with them and get the documentation from their doctor that they can be, that they are not medically able to wear a mask. And we'll work from there and create a plan to try to support them as best we can.
Staying on the mask conversation, can a student use a shield instead of a mask?
So shields typically don't go long enough to cover what's needed to be covered to be determined to be safe. So shields are great in some instances to help out and support, but really I think the research has shown that you need a mask and a shield. There are, as we speak, I'm sure the shields are evolving to be different, to be longer, and you know, perhaps at some point that might be an option, but at this point most of the shields are not considered long enough to be worn without a mask. And
just because it's coming in as we speak about the mask, we're on the topic rather than revisit, what would a typical mask break look like?
So in the secondary side of campus, teachers may choose to take their students out of the classroom. They may choose to do part of the lesson outside, which would be the optimal place of doing a mask break. But also in instances where students are socially distant and seated, they also may be able to take a mask break right there in their classroom and then get back to wearing the mask.
Thank you. Now, many questions are out throughout the chat about live lessons, and if you are remote, you have to check in. So in the secondary level, you are a remote student and you are assigned AA or BB, you must attend those classes by tapping into the Google Meet that the class will be broadcasted. Will those lessons be recorded? Yes, the lessons will be recorded so the students who are remote can go back and look into the lesson or something that maybe has to revisit a particular note or a teaching point made by the teacher. So at the secondary level, clarity, AA, BB, you'll still be assigned a certain cohort. You will have to tune in. And yes, to meet full remote, they will have those lessons recorded for revisiting purposes. And I'll allow the elementary people, excuse me, Mr. Storms wants to add at the
Yeah, I
secondary
just
level.
wanted to add one thing there. There's, just for clarity purposes, students on the secondary side of campus will all be issued an AA or a BB schedule. Students in the secondary, regardless if they are in person or if they are remote, will have an AA or a BB schedule. And in those instances where students are on full remote, those students will be required to tune in and actually join the class at the regularly scheduled time. So it's really important to understand that students, regardless if they are remote or in person, will be issued a schedule which is A or B.
So at the elementary level, we understand that for our students, they may require some adult support in order to be able to engage in the remote instruction. So we anticipate that our remote, for students that are fully remote, while we're able to be in the hybrid in-person plan, there will be a teacher dedicated and supporting that. There will be live learning time. There will be opportunities for parents to seek support. A schedule will be shared for those students, but it will not be necessarily during the regular school day. Although it can be, that's really going to depend on the families that are taking that option and what they need. And when we're talking about the hybrid plan, very similar, the students, when they're home, they will have assignments, they'll have things to watch, things to read and do. They'll have access to their teacher on the Wednesdays when everybody's remote, but it will be material that either supports what they were doing in the classroom when they were present, or material that gets them ready for the next time they're going to be present in person.
On that point you had made, Ms. Campbell, there is a question about if a student needs some support, outside those days. And I think just to piggyback on it, that Wednesdays are a good day for that extra support from teachers, and we're trying to build that into their schedule. At all levels. Real quick one, students generally at the secondary level, and I don't know if at the elementary level, they receive a hall pass. We won't be using any passable hall passes. Paper, disposable, one person, only. We will not be using any passable, reusable hall passes of any sort.
So students will be traveling in the hallways of the primary and intermediate levels, very limited travel. So hall passes really wouldn't be a thing that.
Even so at the intermediate level, two things we've discussed, the need for hand washing opportunities and something that's typically a primary thing, and by intermediate they're going independently, but because we want to limit contact and we want to maintain social distancing, we'll actually be having bathroom breaks in the day, so that so we can kind of have it so a class can go. There's obviously students have an emergency, they'll be able to go and use the facilities, but really trying to eliminate just wandering in the hallway so that we know where everybody is and we can maintain that contact tracing.
A question, when will parents know about the groups in the supply list? I think that was addressed,
answered.
but if you
Yes.
want to.
By the end of next week, we are working on the groups, and we're working hard across campuses to help ensure that families who've requested that their younger children are on the same days that the middle school, high school children are, and that takes time and careful consideration. And by the end of next week, we should be sending out the child's teacher, any supply list, and what cohort group they belong to and hybrid to.
And to piggyback that just for a moment, it's really critical that we actually get as much information from families as we possibly can. The second survey did go out where parents were giving their options in regards to what they want their students to do. And it's really important that we have that information to make the best decisions possible in regards to the AA and BB plans or remote plans. So our offices are working on calling families who have not responded yet to the survey.
And also I want to share, just because I've been looking through questions that were sent to the reopening email. If you have special circumstances about childcare and things, and so it would help if your child was in the A group or the B group, please reach out to your building principal and let them know that. We are trying to accommodate as much of that as possible. We can't send out another survey because it takes so long for us to get the responses to the surveys. Those delay us being able to take action. So just reach out, let us know what your special circumstance is and whether you need to have the beginning of the week or the end of the week. I do want to share though, I want to be clear that A does not mean you're on Monday, Tuesday. You do have to look at the calendar and say, if it's not a 5-day week, then the first 2 days of the week are A and the last 2 days of the week are B. And once we've kind of got this figured out, we'll be sharing a calendar that shows A days and B days. But I know I think I have a lot of people that send me information and say, oh, so my child will be Monday, Tuesday. I really want to be cautious because there could be some weeks where you're Tuesday, Wednesday.
There's questions about orientations, 9th grade orientation, how students get Chromebooks and then learn how to use them. I can speak to the 9th grade orientation from the secondary level that will do some level of remote orientation for students. And that the first couple of days, at least in the high school, and we haven't worked out the details, will be dedicated to trainings such as walking socially distant down the hallway, trainings as proper mask use, trainings as using the Google Classroom, trainings on how to match that up to your calendar. We realize that there's going to be a lot of challenges at the secondary level to kind of get back on the remote situation / in-person situation. And we have to use the Google Classroom both in person and out in order to keep it as streamlined and educationally sound as possible. So a lot of those trainings will be in place for our kids. And any orientation that will occur, which be looking for any updates on Parent Square on those, will be remote, at least at the secondary level, and I'll allow the other principals to speak to that.
That's also true about the middle school. The 6th grade orientation will be incorporated in those first days of school. We'll also be doing some Google Meets with families just in an effort to answer any follow-up questions they may have in regards to that. But it's critical that those first weeks of school, we really establish the procedures, protocols, and how to use their technology to benefit them in this learning process.
And at the intermediate building, we're trying to work out, so we don't have the details yet, but we will shortly, of some opportunities for a child to come in to pick up their Chromebook, make sure that it's going to work, they can log into it and then take it home so that everybody's ready for the first day of school. So we're just finalizing details on that so we can send out dates and times.
And in terms of pre-K and K orientation, typically we have parents ride into school as a transition. That's going to look very different this year. And I'll be working with our teams to come up with a plan, but it will not look like it has in the past, simply because we have to minimize the risk of spreading the germ. So we will try to incorporate some sort of transition for your littles, but the traditional ride-in with your children will not happen this year.
Thank you. Question on band and orchestra. What does it look like moving forward? I can tell you at the secondary level, we're currently working on that question and trying to seek, full disclosure, trying to seek the best way to safely do it while meeting the needs of our students and keeping everybody safe with the physical plant that we have to work with. Another question arose about flexibility on school days, meaning that will people who might need support have that support available to them with the teachers. Wednesday is going to be a very important day for that support, especially for the remote situation. Also, there is, if a student is in a hybrid situation, they are getting live contact with the teacher in their classroom on the AA and BB days. So they're is there a little bit of flexibility, in schedule? There's another question. If a student has an IEP, is there flexibility with hand-in times and so on and so forth? And I'll let Ms. Rabideau speak to that and their IEP needs.
Sure, so IEPs are still considered legal documents in full effect, and I've met this week so far with 2 of my building teams, and then tomorrow I'm meeting with the other 2 to discuss how we can best meet the needs of our IEP students, and be a little bit creative. There are lots of different ideas that these providers have to give the extra support and are willing to do that. The one thing I am excited about is that we do have students in session for 2 days. So those 2 days, we plan to give them as much support as we can for those new skills and those the things that are going to be a little bit more challenging. And then on the days when students are going to be remote, practicing some things that they already know how to do and not expecting that they're trying to learn on their own was part of our discussion. So we're definitely seriously talking about that at the special ed meetings and are available for support. And if you have any concerns about that, I would encourage you to reach out and we can discuss individually how to meet the needs better. Because I know that was a huge concern last spring when we couldn't see you at all. So thank you for that.
Official first day of school. The question was, what is the official first day of school?
We are working through that process, and we will have an answer to our school community next week. No later than Wednesday. We have a board meeting on Tuesday, and we're also working with our different units throughout the district to having further conversations.
Next question is, what will physical education look like? And that is much more distant setting than most physical education settings are going to look like, but utilizing the remote learning, utilizing an emphasis on, at least in the secondary school, an emphasis on fitness planning, life goals, life skills, lifetime sports, and some things that interest the students' own personal interests and pique their sort of exploratory piece behind physical education. The students do have to be at a certain level apart, and it does limit a lot of the physical activity that they can do. And our physical education teachers at the secondary level are currently working to come up with the best plans in place to have a good physical education experience for students.
So I've been looking through the questions from the email, and one thing, a couple of people said they're having trouble finding the plan on the website. So we're going to share a screen right now just to show you where you can find the plan on the website. So if you go to the website, you'll see the big red banner at the top. And then right there where it says district reopening plan, that is actually a link. And there's the plan. I feel like all the other stuff I'm seeing in the email, we've addressed. I'm being asked about water fountains, we talked about that. What does lunch look like?
A lunch question's coming up, middle school, high school, I didn't mean to interrupt. It was covered before, but again, the students will not eat in the cafeteria. They can bring their lunch, but they will be eating in a classroom, and also lunch if they choose to purchase or have a lunch here at school, that's available to them to be delivered into a specific classroom in which they'll be eating. Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Campbell.
No, that was, I mean, that's, will we be providing laptops for educational use, Chromebooks, yes, for grades 3 through 12, and then other arrangements as needed for the pre-K 2. They want, and again, we talked about, we'll have supply lists and anything, arrangements for picking up stuff, we'll be sending out those schedules later in the month as we get things completed and finalized. Continue to send us if you have special requests for A or B day because it works better for your family, please let us know that. We did the CV tech piece really, so I think we've answered all these questions.
Questions, middle school, high school, are the students moving? Yes, the students are moving. We have a traffic pattern or a travel pattern, I guess we would call it, in the middle school and high school. Some hallways are able to be two-way because of their size. Some hallways are only able to be one-way. We would also, a question about dismissal, we would certainly stagger. I think someone suggested staggering. We are going to stagger dismissal out of each classroom to cut down on that travel traffic, and students will adhere by the 6-foot social distancing and mask rules, just as they most likely have been pretty accustomed to at this point in their lives, what they're going through. Anything in addition?
Mrs. Ross, and I'm wondering if you might address this because we talked about it today. If my child is unable to use a cubby, will they be transporting all of their belongings back and forth daily?
So we're gonna want to limit what we're sending back and forth. So we've been talking with the teachers about, brings you back to the backpack question. If you can send your child to school without a backpack, that would be ideal, right? Because we don't want things really going back and forth. And when the teachers maybe provide you with an assignment, they're going to incorporate Seesaw, which is after the child were to complete something, it could be digitally uploaded. So even though we're in the hybrid model, we're showing the kids how to use these systems at these levels in the event that we would have to go and remote and use them again.
And I think that as far as supplies go, we've talked about children, we'll bring them in, we'll have a way for them to store them in a place on the days they're not there, so they'll be assigned to them. There'll be no sharing of materials or supplies. So those things will be dedicated, they'll be stored on the days they're not here and provided to them on the days they are. Anything, like if we're using something in the A group, like a manipulative or something, it will be disinfected and cleaned prior to it being used with the B group and that, right?
Yes, and parents will want to make sure that the supplies that they purchase for, what they keep at school, they're going to want to make sure that they have some of those standard things at home as well. So when the children are on their remote day, they have those materials available to them to complete the hands-on assignments and activities.
Question about meds. Meds in just the meds that may be distributed. We also have people who carry EpiPens and also have people who carry inhalers. Ms. Rabbit,
So-
would you like to take that one, please?
Question is, will we still be doing that?
Will we,
Yes.
will we doing that? So will they self-carry? Are kids gonna get meds as they would traditionally when they're here?
Oh, yes. Earlier I was talking about, we had to dedicate a certain area in each building for where symptomatic individuals would be. And we're making sure that there's an area where kids can come for just their medication issues or to check their, blood sugar levels or get their inhaler or all of those general nurse office kind of visit protocols. So they're still going to be able to access that without a problem. We'll still continue to do that.
Okay. If a student is remote, Ms. Sexton, can they play sports?
Yes, they can. To put it simply, they are a bona fide student.
Thank you. Question keeps coming up. So the school day, is it the same start and end day? Yes. Will students in the secondary building at least, if they are remote, will they have to log into the classes at the same time? The answer is yes, to take care of those. Very interesting question. If a student does have, and to be full disclosure, this may be a very tough question. If a student does have a temperature or can't go to school, can they go remote and have that effort be counted as their attendance? I think at the secondary level, yes, I think that would prove attendance to the class, especially with the offerings that we have. It certainly is a perplexing question. And I would say, but yes, if the work is done and they tuned in and, they maybe didn't exhibit COVID symptoms, but couldn't come to school, they could certainly get credit at our level to be there, yes. One thing that is important to understand at the secondary level is that there is not 10th period this year in a traditional manner, meaning a student would be staying after to get extra help with a teacher in their classroom, as we won't have the ability to put our secondary students on the elementary school bus run as we have in the past, as they have to stay socially distanced and not continue to mix those populations. So another important point as we talk about that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to also bring another point up that you guys will probably be sending out your principal letters to everybody. But when they talk about times of the day, we need to also discuss the piece of actually start times on the campus, because there's no more holding areas for students, that students will not be permitted in the buildings till 7:15. In the elementary, Ms. Campbell, Mrs. Ross.
8:50.
8:50, so we need to make sure that our parents understand that, because there's no holding areas now. People go directly to their classrooms. So that will also change a little bit traffic patterns, especially early morning as people are going to work. We want to be cognizant of that, but also understand that there's strict protocols being followed this year.
So Dr. Palmer, just to be clear, it's 7:15 and 8:50, right? 50.
50. 50.
7:15, 7:15, and 8:50.
In the past, for parent drop-off at the primary level, we've asked parents to escort their children into the building. This year, we're going to have staff out there at the parent drop-off, and it'll be labeled. We're gonna have 4 different entrances for drop-off, but we're gonna ask staff to be out there to collect your children so that you don't come into the building. And we'll funnel them through appropriately, and so we won't have you signing them in, but we will collect them from you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rawson. One last thing, just to let everybody know too, there's a construction update that we will have a wraparound road behind our building that will connect the high school entrance to the middle school parking lot. So it'll be a continual flow of traffic pattern. Parents will be able to drop off their students at the high school and then proceed up. If they're not going to the elementary, to the middle school bearing right, they can go left through Staff Way and leave our campus through that means. We'll have additional information and a drone showing traffic pattern, but we just want to bring it to people's attention tonight.
Thank you. A middle school, high school question was cleaning of classrooms. And what happens is when there is an exchange of students out of one learning space in our middle school, high school, teachers will be asked to wipe down with disinfectant the areas that, the surface areas that students use, and that's between any exchange of students. I believe the protocol stays in place, any exchange of students at the elementary level too. If there is, you travel less, but if there is any exchange.
Right, so, and we also have a question about what if we do get a COVID case in the district? And, boy, I'm gonna say that depends on a lot of different things. If it's an isolated case, the tracking and the exposure, we definitely will be in contact and work with the health department to get their guidance as to how we move forward with that. Dr. Palmer or Mr. Saab, did you want to weigh in as well?
I think the accuracy of that, Mr. Revenue, is exactly that. There will definitely be communication with our school physician as well as the health department, making sure the other component, which is the new part of our reopening plan, the addendum with the 3 components. Parents will feel free to read that. That'll be on our site tonight, but also talk about contact tracing, that we will also follow up on that. That's why the urgency this year with our staff is making sure that our cohort tracking is very important to us. That's why we're not transporting ourselves on multiple buses, limiting ourselves to 1 bus, limiting movement throughout the building. Middle and high schools even limiting their access and movement to make sure of that. So if we did have a case like that, we can turn over information and be much more positive and supportive of the health department as they go through that process.
A couple of primary and intermediate questions. Will a sibling of an intermediate, a student who's in the intermediate with a sibling be able to walk down to the primary for dismissal with their sibling?
we're working that out, but yes, we anticipate, we want to be able to make it so that you don't have to wait in 2 lines of traffic. So we think we're just about there to have that worked out.
Okay, and this question keeps coming up. I'll say it like one more time. If you are on remote in the secondary building, you have to log in to the same times that the students who are in person are in class. Again, if you are on a remote, 100%, and whether you're in cohort A or B, the student has to log in to the same times as the classes are scheduled in the bricks and mortar setting.
Mr. Berry, can I clarify with you with that? I think what some people may read is our remote learning plan. When they read the remote learning plan, that is when our school shuts down and we're completely 100% remote. As long as parents understand we're in a hybrid model, so.
Hybrid 2, correct? Okay,
Yes.
so if you're reading the reopening plan, and that may be the confusion, we are in hybrid 2 and not 100% for remote.
Yeah, can I ask a clarification? So if my child is in the B and they're remote, are they logging in on the A days?
No, they are not. They have
Okay.
the same responsibilities as the B students would in the remote world on those 3 days.
So it's only if I've chosen to do a full remote, then my child needs to be logging in with either their A or their B cohort.
Correct.
Okay.
And the biggest change that's happened since emergency remote learning and this particular hybrid piece where students are on remote learning is that you must be on time for your class at the scheduled time as though you were in school. When we were on emergency remote learning, kids kind of had more freedom in regards to when it was they were taking those and completing that work.
So what about if it's like a study hall? Do I still log into that?
No, you wouldn't log into your study hall. Your study hall is more of a free period for you and you'll be able to, it'll be more of a break period for you.
Okay, but what about like gym?
You would need to log in for that. All classes, you would need to log in for.
All specials you need to log into. You could eat your lunch during the lunchtime would be a suggestion. You wouldn't have to remote into lunch.
Right?
So other questions back to the primary elementary world. What does recess look like?
So, we're working on a plan, for recess, and it will still be the 20-minute, interval of time after the children eat in their classrooms. And they'll be assigned, a monitor and a quadrant outside so that it is important for the children to get fresh air, and we will keep them socially distanced as appropriate to the activity that they're doing.
Yeah, and I know in the intermediate building at some of my grade level, when they've been meeting, they've just been trying to brainstorm, just like I think they do this every year, but on days when there has to be indoor recess because there isn't, the weather doesn't cooperate, they will have some suggestions for what they could be doing in the classroom in their socially distanced space, but to get a little bit of movement, but not without breaking the social distance piece.
Unloading and loading buses, what is that going to look like? And I can speak to the secondary end, and buses will enter into the loop, and we are much like we would on a New England day where it's really cold. We're going to unload the buses as they arrive in the middle school, high school, and there's an entrance in between the two. And utilize those 3 entrances to socially distance and cut down the flow of traffic in kind of waves entering the building, and then also staggering our dismissal times as we exit the building and travel in waves rather than in masses.
Similarly, we're doing a drop and go as we do when it's colder weather and we don't want children walking when it's below freezing temperatures. So it will be a drop and go at our intermediate doors, and that will help with the flow of traffic. Students will go directly to their classrooms. And Mrs. Campbell and I are working on a plan to pack a single bus at a time to go home.
So I did just get a question in my email here in regards to students with disabilities and just parents being concerned about how they struggle through remote learning and that their child did not make the progress they were hoping for, and it's very difficult to help their child with a disability at home. And I we understand and we feel for you. Last spring, we created the new IEPs and the new 504s for this fall. With that information in mind, knowing that not only did our students with disabilities, will they experience COVID slide, but everybody's gonna experience that a little bit. So as we come back, teachers, both general education teachers and special education teachers and service providers will be looking at what skills need to be kind of filled in that perhaps some of our students need a little bit more practice with that we couldn't quite hit as well as we wanted to during the remote instruction. So teachers understand that, and we're gonna do our best to fill in those gaps and move forward. I know the building principals have been working hard about establishing some power standards to help streamline some of the instruction so that our students are really getting the fundamentals of what they need to read and write and do math. But our IEPs will go as follows, and we will do our best to offer service. I'll be happy to speak with anyone that has concerns about that. I'll certainly call this family. I don't know if anybody else wanted to.
So there's also questions, I think there's confusion about the hybrid model, and my apologies if I've been mostly explaining it, my apologies if it wasn't explained correctly, but I think it's a high school, middle school question. So if you are in AA, you're the A cohort, you'll attend school on those days. But so when you're done your Tuesday, at the end of the day, the teachers will have set you up for the next 3 days, and you're to log in on those next 3 days, but you do not have to log in on those times. So if you're AA, you don't have to log into the BB days at 7:30 for your ELA class. You're going to have different activities, because if you think about it, the AA students in person will be receive a certain amount of information. When the BB students arrive, they're going to have to receive that same amount of information in that live setting in order to keep the class paced and scope and sequence met and the learning standards met. So those students on those 3 remote days, if you are in the hybrid model, so if you're say you're the AA cohort on our remote day, our Wednesday, or Thursday and Friday, there isn't a schedule for you to follow. However, if you're BB on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, there isn't a schedule for you to follow, but there will be things for you to do. Question about CB Tech. If you are a first-year CB Tech student, you will be live at CB Tech on Monday and Tuesday, but you will be perused BB cohort, and you will have to attend those classes as they are taught live on Thursday and Friday. That is a little bit confusing. So now if you're full remote, you're still going to be in an A or a B cohort. If you're the A cohort, you have to remote in on A days and then follow the open remote schedule on B days. Hopefully that clears up these questions that are coming in as we talk. And I think also, people are asking, will communication come out with all this, their students' assignments, what day? Absolutely. Absolutely. That it's coming, it's in the works, absolutely. Teachers' assignments and schedules, providers, and so on and so forth. I think we're in fairly good shape with the chat, Dr. Palmer.
We are good. Well, we'd like to communicate with the public now that we thank you for taking the time. If there are additional questions, we will be here tomorrow night also answering questions, not going over the plan, but there may be additional information that you want to learn about concerning the addendum, the 3 plans that we have to have. They are still within our master plan, but these are the requirements that Governor Cuomo has also asked us to put on our website. I couldn't thank the administrators more. They did a great job tonight. This is also available, Jared, on YouTube.
Yes, and I'll post it on the website.
I'm sorry?
It'll be on YouTube, the website, and I'll post it on Facebook.
We'll put this on YouTube later, so if people did not get a chance to participate or hear the answers, they can hear it at that time. That will also be posted on our website so they can see where they need to go. Greatly appreciated, and we will have our meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Thank you.